Discover the amazing secret. How 30 days of daily discipline transformed my life forever. Michael sat in his cubicle, the sterile environment humming around him like an oppressive soundtrack. It was another Tuesday, another dull day where the monotony gnawed at him. He felt like a ghost wearing a guise of professionalism, attending endless meetings where the voices droned like a distant storm. His older brother's success loomed large, slicing through Michael's self-worth with each mention of promotions, accolades, and societal admiration. Of course, everyone admired the younger McAllister, an upstanding lawyer at the prestigious firm downtown, while Michael was just the lesser brother, shelving his aspirations at the feet of corporate complacency. But this day was different, at least it could be. After helping his elderly mentor at the local community center, he felt an unexpected flicker of hope. During their banter about analytics and problem-solving, the mentor had looked him square in the eyes and said, "You've got an eye for detail, Michael. Never underestimate it." The sentence hung in the air, a quiet realization that there was substance to his existence buried beneath the layers of mediocrity. Could he really reclaim his life? It was a staggering thought. When he embarked on his 30-day quest for disciplined early morning runs, evenings filled with books that shaped his identity, a part of him surged with determination. Yet each victory was battered by the sneers of colleagues. "Who does he think he is?" they whispered, as he discarded their late-night happy hour invites. Their dismissive glances felt like weights, dragging him into a familiar abyss of uncertainty. Was it even worth trying to break those chains? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as things began shifting in his favor, opportunity dangled dangerously close, a promotion that seemed to shimmer with promise. Anxiety and excitement clawed at his insides. The thought of finally stepping out from his brother's shadow, of proving to himself that he could actually succeed, was intoxicating. But Michael's thrill swiftly morphed to dread when he learned of a coworker's scheme to undermine him. The whispers of complacency tempted him. Surrender to silence. Hold tightly to the familiar instead of risking it all for integrity. The boardroom filled with tension as he faced the choice. Remain the dutiful employee or confront the growing treachery. Memories of his mentor's belief in merit and courage surged through his mind, but doubt encroached from every angle. Would they even listen? Would his voice tremble with courage or slip away, bloated by fear? A storm brewed inside him, swirling with indecision just as the meeting loomed closer. The moment of reckoning demanded clarity from his heart, yet all he could hold on to were fragmented thoughts battling for dominance. As the air thickened with rehearsed confidences and unspoken animosities, Michael took a breath. He felt lost, teetering between feigning ignorance and standing tall against the dishonesty that tainted his workplace. With adrenaline coursing through him, he realized the time had come. Standing to face the crowd, his heart raced, muscles tensed. Would his courage shatter the facade, or would it bury him deeper beneath the weight of secrecy? The room fell silent as the weight of Michael's decision pressed down on him. He could practically hear the ticking clock, the echoes of past failures clawing at his resolve. This was not merely a meeting. It was his chance, a fork in the road that would define not only his career but also his self-worth. The horizon of change shimmered tantalizingly ahead, but uncertainty tightened its grip even further. Michael's mind raced, replaying fragments of conversations he had shared with colleagues, all filled with doubt and frivolity, mocking his efforts to step outside the comfort zone. Still, the words of his mentor lingered like a beacon, guiding him through the fog of self-doubt. Never underestimate your ability to make a difference. Taking a deep breath, he resolved to step into the light, determined to unravel the deceit tainting his workplace. The air crackled with tension as he spoke, each word a deliberate strike against the ordinary and accepted. "I've noticed irregularities in our project reports," he began, his voice steady, But inside, a tempest raged. He could sense skepticism washing over his colleagues, faces turning toward one another, whispering in tones masked by feigned interest. This was the moment he had prepared for, yet doubt wrestled to hold him back. Could he really challenge the status quo? Courage began to swell from the depths of his being. And I believe that we need to confront these issues openly, rather than hide behind facades of performance metrics. His heart pounded, and he held on fiercely to the resolve that came from those early morning runs and late-night readings. He was not merely a cog in the wheel. He was a voice, an eye for detail that could bring light to the murky waters of his environment. One colleague scoffed, a practiced sneer slicing through Michael's momentum, but this time he refused to let it pierce his confidence. He locked eyes with his accuser, feeling the fire of determination flare within. He would not shrink back this time. Instead, he turned to speak directly to the room, emphasizing the value of transparency and integrity. The momentum slowly shifted as whispers faded into silence, skepticism giving way to mounting intrigue. The boardroom that previously felt like a noose began to feel like a stage, and he, the actor, finally ready to step into his own spotlight. He felt a surge of exhilaration as he laid out his findings, detailing discrepancies that no one thought to question. His words resonated, sparking others to speak up, to share their own observations, silencing the cynics. The approaching storm ceased as his colleagues began to unite. He had ignited a flicker of courage in others. Each voice that joined his added strength to his case, fortified his resolve. As the meeting drew to a close, Michael felt a sense of belonging he had long thought impossible. However, undercurrents of anxiety still coiled in his stomach. He had spoken out, yes, but the real confrontation lay ahead. The scheming coworker would not remain dormant for long. What would happen when they faced off one-on-one? Would antagonism turn to desperation? Michael felt the wall close in as uncertainty once again etched itself into his psyche, but deeper still lay hope. The taste of victory was bittersweet as he contemplated the next steps. He had changed the narrative, but a looming confrontation awaited. Michael knew that overcoming the challenge of deceit among his peers was just the beginning. Ultimately, he would need to confront the shadow of his brother's success, too, and prove to himself that he was, indeed, worthy of respect and recognition. As he left the boardroom, adrenaline coursing through him like lightning, he heard a voice calling out from behind, "It's not over yet, Michael. You'll need more than courage to deal with what's coming." He turned, heart pounding with anticipation. What exactly did he still have to face? With each step away from the boardroom, Michael felt both exhilaration and trepidation churning inside him. The voice trailing him haunted his thoughts, a harbinger of the uncertainty still to come. His experience today had reshaped him, fueling a need for further change. This victory was only a spark. He needed to build a fire that could withstand the inevitable backlash. As he pushed through the office halls, determination etched on his face. Michael resolved to fortify himself mentally and emotionally. Engagement with reality felt different now. Each interaction was a negotiation, each exchange a battle of wills. He would cultivate an environment where transparency thrived, but that required preparation. He had no illusions. There would be pushback from those who thrived in the shadows. Back at his workstation, he stared at the unfinished project reports before him. They seemed innocuous, mere templates covered in numbers and graphs, but beneath them lay the potential for more deceit. Michael knew his next step was to gather more intel. Knowledge would be his armor against future confrontation. He pulled out a notebook, sketching out a plan that encompassed gathering facts and information that would further validate the discrepancies he had uncovered. Late nights became his new routine. He pored over documents, spiraling deeper into the abyss of audits and revisions. The office grew quiet around him as his colleagues trickled out, leaving him cocooned in solitude. Skimming through spreadsheets felt tedious, yet within those lines and cells hid secrets that could either unlock his future success or unravel everything he had begun to build. One evening, he found compelling patterns within the project reports. They reflected problems eager to reveal themselves. Something clicked. a hidden incompetence that had perpetuated a culture of mediocrity and deceit. The patterns morphed from simple data into a narrative, a story of systemic oversight threaded with the incompetence of leadership that had allowed it to fester. With the dawn approaching, fatigue draped over him, but an undercurrent of adrenaline pushed him through. This was not merely a quest for vindication. It was a journey towards establishing a framework of integrity in a crooked landscape. His mind raced with the possibilities of exposing the rot that infected his workplace. But he also felt the burden of doubt creeping back. Was it enough to challenge the wrongdoings? Would he ultimately be the architect of change or merely a pawn in someone else's game? As Michael began organizing his findings into a clear presentation, he recalled his brother's success story that often loomed over him like a shadow. Could he reconcile his ambitions and jealousy? What drove him to seek recognition? A vision of embracing his own legacy, distinct from his brother's, fueled his fire. He resolved that in dismantling the deceit at work, he was sculpting his own identity, and perhaps even paving a path toward the success he longed for. However, as he prepared to confront his opponents, he couldn't shake the feeling that a darker undercurrent was stirring in the office. Whispers reached his ears through the cubicle walls. Those unsatisfied with his defiance were assembling their own response. Would he be able to articulate his findings and stand firm against the accusations that now seemed inevitable? Just as Michael finished piecing together his materials for an upcoming meeting, an unsettling thought crossed his mind. The confrontation he anticipated would determine not just his workplace standing, but the course of his entire career. The morning light filtered through the office windows, casting long shadows that seemed to mock him. Michael braced himself for the impending showdown, knowing it would demand everything he had developed. He inhaled deeply, steeling himself. Moments later, he received a message: a meeting had been called. The subject? Response to recent findings. The moment of truth awaited. How prepared could he truly be? Michael entered the meeting room with a tightly controlled exterior, but inside, adrenaline coursed through his veins. The polished table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark reminder of the polished facades he was about to dismantle. As the others filed in, he took a moment to collect his thoughts. This was no longer just about numbers. It was about integrity, and he felt the weight of every choice resting squarely on his shoulders. The atmosphere was thick with tension as colleagues took their seats. He could read the skepticism on their faces, the murmurings that hinted at dissent. Michael's resolve hardened. It was time to be the leader he had always aspired to be, even in the face of potential ridicule. Once everyone settled, he stood. Words struggled at the edge of his throat, hesitant, but he pushed them forth, determined to capture the board's attention. Thank you all for coming. I want to address some discrepancies I discovered within our project reports, he started, his voice steady though it trembled slightly. As he progressed through the data, the initial murmurings faded into an uncomfortable silence, replaced by furrowed brows and cross-examination glances. He spoke of patterns, implications, and morality, framing the information not just as numbers but as a call to action. But as he laid out his findings, he noticed the slightest flicker of indignation from his manager, Susan. Her expression hardened into disapproval, ready to pounce. Michael, are you suggesting we've been negligent? She interjected sharply. The room stiffened, and the subtle shift in dynamics sent a wave of apprehension over him. How could he defend the truth without making enemies? Not negligent, just perhaps misguided, he replied, forcing a leadership calm into his voice. I believe we can turn this around if we recognize where we need improvement. Despite the fluttering anxiety in his stomach, Michael realized this was the heart of his transformation, facing opposition, standing firm against the paralysis of fear that had defined his past. Susan leaned back, her demeanor a blend of skepticism and scrutiny. Your findings could be taken as an indictment of our leadership. What exactly do you think has gone wrong here? The challenge released a ripple of tension throughout the room. Michael could almost feel the temperature rising. Every eye was now fixed squarely on him, waiting for a misstep. He exhaled slowly, conjuring up every ounce of composure. I think we have been operating under a business-as-usual mindset, ignoring systemic problems that, if left unaddressed, will jeopardize our integrity and future success, he stated, relishing the significance of every word. The more he spoke, the more convinced he became of his own authority. This was not just a presentation, it was a declaration of change. But as he navigated through each point, revealing discrepancies and offering insights on solutions, a realization seeped into his thoughts. He was not merely asserting himself as an employee but embarking on a journey of self-definition. Each moment bore the potential for a decision that would contradict his past self and shape a new, resilient identity. As the meeting wore on, however, a familiar voice whispered doubt, challenging him internally. This self-doubt had haunted him since he could remember. Was he even ready for the backlash? Would this effort elevate him, or would it mark his downfall? The tension culminated when, after completing his presentation, Susan leaned forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Thank you, Michael. We'll take this under advisement. But understand, challenging the status quo can have consequences." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, threatening a storm that could obliterate everything he had dared to build. With a collective breath, he faced his peers, staring down the path that stretched out before him, one filled with uncertainty, but also laden with possibilities. He squared his shoulders, feeling an uncharacteristic resolve. "I'm ready for those consequences," he replied firmly, the immediate crack in his voice betraying his inner chaos. As the meeting concluded, Michael found himself at a crossroads, teetering precariously on the edge of a new reality. The stakes had never been higher. What he didn't know was how the very people he sought to confront would respond next. In the days to come, Michael could find support or face unexpected retribution from those he once regarded as allies. As he stepped out of the conference room, a pulse of anxiety thrummed in the air. Could he withstand the storm he had stirred? Would he rise as a leader or crumble under the weight of the turmoil ahead? The rhythm of the office hummed as Michael returned to his desk, but a sense of isolation draped over him like a heavy blanket. The faint chatter of colleagues felt distant, as if he were observing from a different plane. Each keystroke echoed louder than usual, marking time as he sorted through emails that required his attention yet felt like trivial distractions in the wake of his assertion at the meeting. He glanced around, catching sight of his co-workers' furtive glances. Whispers circulated like wildfire, igniting unease in the atmosphere. The anticipation of their reactions loomed large. Would they view him as a bold challenger or a reckless fool? The thought intruded into his mind, repeating an incessant mantra. Self-doubt had been an unwelcome companion for far too long. This time, though, it felt different. He was undertaking a conscious reassessment of his motivations. He didn't want to succumb to fear. He wanted to lead, to be the architect of change instead of a passive observer in his career. As the hours trickled by, what began as avoiding confrontation morphed into a proactive desire for dialogue. Michael knew he had to gauge how his colleagues responded. Would they help him unveil solutions to the discrepancies he had pointed out, or cling to their comfortable ignorance? He decided to initiate conversations first with Alicia, a junior analyst who had been visibly nodding during his presentation. "Can we talk?" he asked, an eagerness in his voice that surprised him. They found a quiet corner, away from prying ears. "What you said in there, it resonated with me," she confessed, her eyes brightening. "I've noticed things too, but I wasn't sure how to voice them." The exchange ignited something powerful within him. Here was a flicker of the change he wished to see, a testament to leadership fostering courage. They bounced ideas off each other, drafting potential reports that highlighted the discrepancies Michael had highlighted. These weren't just numbers to him anymore. They represented a path toward actively writing a new narrative. Fueled by this exchange, Michael approached others throughout the week. Some were receptive, while others were defensive, but he remained steadfast. Each conversation chipped away at his previous doubts. Even Susan's pointed remarks, which once sent chills through him, started to feel like opportunities for clarity rather than threats. However, the balance was precarious. At times, he felt the pressure mounting, nerves tightening around him as he considered the inevitable backlash when questioning authority. But in transforming doubt into action, something unexpected blossomed a newfound resilience. At home that evening, while checking emails, he caught a headline asking, "Are you ready to speak your truth?" The question dived deep into his psyche, sparking a recognition that he hadn't just brought issues to light. He was gradually shaping what he wanted out of his personal and professional existence. He realized it was not merely about challenging others. It was about acknowledging his own worth and valuing his perspectives as legitimate inputs to meaningful change. Yet, amid this progress, a persistent thought began to gnaw at him again. If confronting the status quo could be potential self-sabotage, what if allies became adversaries? With Susan's words echoing in the background, he felt the mounting pressure to prepare for the repercussions of his decisions. As he turned off his laptop and headed to bed, Michael knew he could no longer shield himself from the storm he had invited. The adrenaline surged again as he anticipated the next day's encounters and the conversations that awaited him. He felt a wave of determination rise within him, a stark promise that this journey wasn't merely about numbers. It was about carving out a space for authentic leadership. He lay awake, evaluating his next steps while the city buzzed outside his window, blissfully unaware of the transformative path unfolding within him. The dawn would bring clarity and, perhaps, a chance to finally confront Susan. Directly, would he stand firm in the face of her scrutiny, or would he falter under pressure? The office felt different in the morning light, rays filtering through the blinds casting stripes across the floor. Michael arrived earlier than usual, heart racing, nerves crackling with anticipation. As he settled in with a cup of coffee, he replayed the possible dialogues in his head. Today was crucial. It was time to confront the lingering weight of Susan's authority and establish where he truly stood. His breath hitched as he walked toward her cubicle, each step echoing with uncertainty. How he wished for a shield, something to insulate him from potential conflict. Memories of previous interactions with Susan rushed back, encounters marred by her sharp dismissals and barbed comments. Yet, each recollection now felt less like a stranglehold and more like a driving force. He had nothing to lose except that shroud of doubt. "Michael," she acknowledged, her voice cool, distracted by the screen in front of her. "Got a minute?" he replied, managing to sound steadier than he felt. Her eyes flicked up, assessing him instantly. "What's on your mind?" "I think we need to talk about the findings I presented last week." Even saying it set off a tremor inside him. He was initiating a conversation that could realign their entire working relationship. "I spoke with some analysts," he continued, a slight tremor breaking into his voice, yet he pressed on. "It seems there are areas we can improve, based on what I highlighted. I want us to work together on this." Her response was immediate, an eyebrow raised, a challenge circulating in the air between them. "You're suggesting changes to a system that's worked for years, Michael. Why now? What makes you think this isn't just your own personal agenda?" He felt his resolve hardening amidst her skepticism. "Because I believe there's a gap between the goals we set and the actual outcomes we're achieving. It's not just about me. I think we owe it to the team to explore these avenues." Silence hung, thick and almost suffocating. A small victory surged within him. He had not retreated under her scrutiny. Instead, he felt grounded in his intentions. He took a step forward, leaning slightly against her desk. "I want your expertise on this. We can build on the findings together." Her expression softened, just a fraction. "You're taking a risk, you know. There are consequences for challenging the way things are." "I'm aware," he replied, with a steadiness that surprised even him. "But if not now, when? I genuinely want us to be successful." There were moments of discord where the air felt charged with uncertainty, but he held the tension, revealing a glimpse of his emerging leadership. Over the next few minutes, they engaged in a back and forth, swapping ideas like pendulums, finding common ground amid debates. Luminescence of collaboration started to replace the initial friction, and for the first time he saw a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. Yet, even as the atmosphere lifted, the echoes of his earlier fears lingered. He knew the office culture didn't favor challenges. He was venturing into uncharted territory. Would his coworkers see him as a reformer, or misjudge his intentions. As he moved away from Susan's desk, a mix of exhilaration and conflict surged within him. Each step underscored his resilience. The way he had articulated his perspective transformed something within him. Perhaps Susan was right. There would be consequences, but those consequences could also pave the way for growth. The day wore on, fraught with anticipation of how their conversation would reshape the dynamics around the office. He could sense the resistance in whispers, the laughter that felt hollow at the edges. But he had already set his course. He couldn't go back. Embracing this change brought with it the clarity he sought, even amidst uncertainty. As he settled in for the day, a message flickered on his screen, a formal invitation for a meeting with upper management to discuss ongoing performance issues. Suddenly, dread intertwined with determination. Was this the backlash he had anticipated, or a chance to elevate the conversation he had just begun? Caught between potential outcomes, Michael took a deep breath, determined to uncover his next steps. The path ahead was fraught with challenges that would test him again and again. Would he rise to meet those opportunities, or would hidden fears prevent him from fully embracing the change? The tension coiled tightly around Michael as the minutes dwindled before the upper management meeting. Each tick of the clock felt magnified as he mentally prepared himself to face the consequences of his discussion with Susan. He couldn't shake the nagging doubt that now accompanied his newfound courage. The words he de-strung together in hope might lead to his unraveling instead. He glanced out the window, searching for clarity in the steadily darkening sky, a reflection of the storm brewing within him. Forcing himself to refocus, he retrieved the reports he'd been assembling for weeks. The findings, which seemed so promising mere hours earlier, now loomed over him like a precipice. Would they come off as mere complaints framed in eloquent language? Or could he transform them into actionable insights that management couldn't ignore? As he shuffled through the pages, Michael replayed the details of Susan's challenge, eager to remember the spark of inspiration that had ignited his vision. Yet, the unrelenting specter of doubt resurfaced. Had he really acquired enough acumen and support to effect change when faced with the upper echelons of authority? His thoughts spiraled. Was he prepared for what lay ahead in the meeting? Did he truly possess the conviction to leverage his insights against potential rebuff? It was one thing to confront Susan, but an entirely different battleground awaited among the higher management. Just then, the office door swung open, and Susan stepped in, her face unusually inscrutable. "Michael," she said, a hint of urgency tinged with concern in her voice. "Can we talk?" "Of course," he replied, heart racing anew. Was this about the meeting, or was she retracting her offer for collaboration? He half expected an admonishment. "Look," she began, lowering her voice, "I've thought about what you said earlier. You were right, it's not just about me. The team deserves this conversation. I may not agree with how you went about initiating it," but she hesitated, measuring her words. "You've shown a willingness to take risks that not many in this office will." The unexpected compliment stunned him, and Michael wondered if the current tension diminished ever so slightly. "So, you're willing to support me during the meeting?" It felt like a litmus test. The answer could inform his path not just in this moment but long-term. "Support doesn't come easily to me," she said, her eyes narrowing cautiously. "But let us be clear. This is your show now. Once you step into that meeting, you carry the weight of your convictions. I won't step in if they challenge you." "I understand," he uttered, steeling his resolve. "But I appreciate your honesty. Just make sure you prepare some solid responses. They will try to poke holes in your analysis." The gravity of her advice ignited a determined fire within him. As she walked away, Michael felt invigorated by her acknowledgement. It acted like a catalyst for his growing confidence. This moment was pivotal. Not only had he gathered support from Susan, but he also realized he had to own his perspective. Time pressed on, and he quickly jotted down key arguments and questions he could anticipate from management. The words flowed like a stream, gaining strength. He felt the connection between his passions and professional aspirations cementing further. As he approached the conference room, determination surged through his body like adrenaline. He was no longer merely a cog in the wheel. He was destined to be a part of its transformation. He stepped inside, facing the panel of upper management, their stern expressions greeting him. First impressions mattered, and he reminded himself that carrying the weight of his insights meant speaking with intent. The moment of truth arrived. Would he shrink back under the scrutiny, or would he embrace the challenge before him, a soul ready to engage in battle? His heart raced as he settled into his seat, glancing at the stack of documents before him. This was about more than performance. It was about his evolution, his reaffirmation of self. With a deep breath, he began, "Thank you for having me. I'd like to discuss ways we can improve performance based on thorough insights I've gathered." But as he spoke, a voice from the back interrupted. "Michael, what makes you think you're ready for this?" The challenge was launched, and the shadows of doubt flickered briefly. This time he wouldn't hide. He would face this head-on, for better or worse. The time had come to confront the expectations that suffocated his growth. The real fight had just begun. The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing, as Michael's mind raced. Why did the voice echo? Backtracking through his thoughts, he realized the challenge hit deeper than he expected. It wasn't merely an inquiry from a colleague. It served as a mirror to his insecurities. He had proclaimed himself ready, but now faced with skepticism, he felt the weight of that unpreparedness. "Because," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt, "I have spent weeks gathering data that clearly outlines our inefficiencies and possible solutions. It's not about personal readiness. It's about improving our team's future." The panel scrutinized him, exchanging glances that fed his sense of unease. Their silence bore into him, as if they were probing for weaknesses. Michael had anticipated questions, but not a direct challenge that unearthed his deepest fears about his expertise and authority. For a moment, he wondered if the task before him was beyond his reach. But then, amid the swirling uncertainty, clarity struck. Susan's words resonated in his mind, his willingness to take risks. It was a newfound perspective he needed to share, turning this confrontation into an opportunity. "I am here not just to defend these findings but to encourage each of us, including you, to embrace innovative methods for growth." With each sentence, his conviction solidified. He recalled the specific examples he prepared: a decrease in productivity ratings linked to outdated systems, a proposal for new tools that promised efficiency and cost-effectiveness. He could see the flickers of interest among some of the managers, their posture slightly easing. Perhaps they were ready to listen. "Let us start with the reports," he continued, presenting the first chart. As his fingers gestured over the data, a spark ignited within him. He was speaking, not just out of obligation but from a place of genuine belief in what he presented. "Look at how these indicators correlate with team morale and productivity. I believe that implementing these changes could lead to significant boosts in both areas." A manager at the table leaned forward, skepticism replaced with curiosity. "And what specific outcomes do you foresee if we implement these solutions? Do you have any projections?" "Yes," Michael responded, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "With the adoption of these tools, we could elevate overall performance by at least 20% over the next quarter. And I'm willing to monitor the implementation closely to ensure we stay on track." The air shifted. This was the moment he had longed for. His voice, brimming with newfound authority, commanded attention. Doubt transformed into determination. Yet, despite the revelations formalizing on paper, he felt another obstacle looming. The larger issue remained. Amid the strategies and projections, there lay a fear swelling within him. What if they accepted the proposals but rejected him, the person behind the plan? Could he stand firm against their future critiques when they unfolded? Michael was abruptly drawn back by another question, a different manager now testing his resolve. "Let us say we move forward, but the initiative doesn't yield the expected results. How will you address that failure?" "To begin with," he replied, adrenaline pulsing through his veins, "I'm committed to a feedback loop. Owning the outcomes, whether success or failure, will allow us to recalibrate our approach swiftly." There it was again, the resolve he had built. He would embrace the consequences of his suggestions, refuse to falter under the weight of accountability. The meeting continued, and Michael found himself in a rhythm he had never expected. As discussions flowed, he realized that the doubts which had plagued him transformed into a drive for clarity and resolve. This was no longer an isolated battle. He was forging paths not just for himself but for the entire team. As he wrapped up, a mix of tension and exhilaration coursed through him. The panel's murmurs indicated he had piqued interest, at least. But as they prepared to adjourn, he sensed there remained unfinished business beneath their polite deliberations. Would their acceptance grant him the validation he craved, or merely surface-level support that could unravel the moment he encountered further resistance? As he exited the room, a steely resolve shifted into place. Michael was on the cusp of change, both for them and himself. But now, he needed to ensure that the momentum built within the meeting carried forward, delving deeper into the unknowns ahead. What he hadn't embraced before was just how vital it would be to prepare for not only the winds of acceptance but the storms of rejection lying just beyond the horizon. The stakes had risen dramatically, and as he exited the conference room, a sense of urgency ignited within him. How far was he willing to go to protect this newfound confidence? The real question lingered: was he prepared not just for success, but for the cost of achieving it? The following days pulled Michael into a whirlwind of thoughts, each echoing the weight of the meeting. The approval from the panel, now behind him, felt far too fragile. As he walked through the office, buzzing with newfound energy, the murmurs and glances from his colleagues were no longer just white noise. They became scrutinizing whispers, each one assessing his credibility, ready to shatter it at the hint of misstep. In the quiet moments, doubt began to creep back in. With every new strategy he proposed, his mind conjured the what-ifs. What if the projections proved inaccurate? What if resistance from the team destabilized the initiative? Each question felt like a stone in his gut, slowing his progress. The lessons he had learned about risk-taking began to feel like burdens, shifting from empowering mantras to echoing warnings of folly. Yet he realized he had a choice. The disciplined Susan had spoken of wasn't just about taking risks. It was about cultivating resilience. In the days following the meeting, he committed to practicing this philosophy. He outlined specific goals, breaking them into manageable daily tasks that would resonate beyond the confines of the office walls. Determined not just to adhere to the operational changes but to embody the growth he sought, he drafted a self-improvement plan that would challenge him daily. Each morning, he designed micro-challenges, tackling one uncomfortable conversation with a team member, presenting a new idea in team meetings, or experimenting with different approaches to common problems. The internal battle between vulnerability and ambition was fierce, but he pressed on, confronting every obstacle in his path with calculated bravery. As he navigated these new routines, small victories began to pile up like building blocks. A supportive conversation with a hesitant colleague inspired collaborative ideas. Presenting his findings confidently earned him nods of respect and affirmation. The initial trepidation that clung to him transformed into a fierce sense of ownership. He was not only laying the groundwork for expanding the team's efficiency, but also fostering an environment ripe for growth and creativity. Then, one afternoon, an unexpected meeting invitation landed on his desk, an impromptu gathering with upper management to discuss the broader implications of his proposals. His pulse raced as he read the email. Was this what he had originally desired? This sudden recognition? Or was it merely an unforeseen pressure to deliver? The specter of doubt loomed again, casting a shadow over his excitement. Sitting in the conference room, he observed the dynamics shift as executives debated the direction of the team. Their discussions revealed fraught tensions, resistance to change surfacing like an insidious weed threatening to choke off any momentum he had generated. With each passing moment, the stakes felt increasingly perilous. Michael had to think on his feet. He began mapping strategies in his mind, formulating rebuttals to each concern. When it came time for him to speak, the notes he had painstakingly prepared felt insufficient. However, armed with the trust in his capabilities forged in recent days, he chose authenticity over perfection. What I'm proposing isn't merely about statistics, he began, his voice unwavering despite the racing thoughts. It's about fostering a team culture that thrives on innovative thinking and collective responsibility. Yet, as he unfolded his vision, tensions flared. Doubts manifested as pointed questions, some questioning the feasibility of the changes, others challenging the thought that they could push through resistance. It became clear that acceptance hinged not just on his ideas, but on convincing a body of skeptics burdened by their own positions. In that pivotal moment, Michael felt it. The shift, the thinly veiled animosity coiled like a snake ready to strike. His next words mattered more than ever, not only for the strategy's sake but for his professional identity. This would define him. What if we don't change? He posed, stripping away the layers of technical jargon to expose a fundamental truth. Stagnation was the real risk, and opting to remain in a comfort zone was a far more daunting failure than breaking new ground. He watched as their expressions flickered, the silence a deafening heartbeat in the room. Would it resonate, or would it divide them further? In that raw honesty, Michael knew he just stepped into the arena of true leadership. But would it be enough? The clock ticked down the minutes, the air thick with anticipation, and he felt the pressure circling tighter. The moment of truth was approaching, and the consequences could either prove pivotal to his purpose or unravel it completely. What awaited him on the other side of this confrontation hinged not only on his potential for success but on the unwavering resolve to stand tall against the fear of failure. Michael stood in the imposing office of the executive suite, facing the panel seated before him executives who held the power to determine the trajectory of his career. After a thorough presentation, the direction of the dialogue had shifted ominously. He felt the weight of their skepticism hanging heavy in the air, each question echoing his insecurities. What if we don't change? He had asked, his voice steady but layered with urgency. He noticed how some faces softened, their rigidity momentarily receding. This was not merely about presenting data. It was about instilling a sense of shared responsibility and validating the unsettling truths he had unearthed. His pulse quickened, fueling a surge of determination. Stagnation is a risk far more daunting than breaking new ground, he continued. The room was thick with tension, yet for the first time, he realized he had chosen courage over fear. This wasn't just a presentation. It was a declaration of his identity, a promise to himself that he would not back down. In the next moments, he focused the dialogue on actionable insights, illustrating within his narrative the intrinsic connections between the team's productivity and their morale. He challenged the status quo, bringing forward concepts that could not be disregarded. His newfound confidence rippled in the room, and he began noticing subtle nods among the executives as his words resonated. Simultaneously, an internal acknowledgement blossomed. He was no longer the shadow of his older brother's legacy. Rather, he was carving his own place, embodying the transformation he had worked tirelessly to achieve. The flickering flames of self-doubt were extinguished by a robust sense of purpose, each interaction wiping clean the remnants of his past hesitations. As the conversation developed, one executive challenged him again, asking what would happen if the initiatives he proposed fell short of expectations. Rather than retreating, Michael smiled inwardly at the irony. This was the moment he had trained for, the moment to fortify his resilience. If we fall short, I commit to owning the outcomes. A feedback loop will enable us to recalibrate quickly and learn from any missteps moving forward, he asserted, every word buoyed by conviction. Returning to the crux of the discussion, he emphasized the necessity for collective courage in embracing change, urging that the path forward lay not within individual egos, but in unifying strengths and acknowledging weaknesses across the board. The executives began to lean in, a palpable shift from skepticism to curiosity surfacing. He felt a surge of empowerment coursing through him. This was what leadership meant, facing challenges head-on, while inspiring others to join him. Days later, the results of the meeting began to unfold as upper management approved a pilot program for implementing his proposed strategies. A sense of elation washed over him, but deeper felt an affirmation of identity. He had not just proven himself worthy. He had earned notability based on the merit of transparent dialogue and data-driven solutions. One evening, while working late at his desk, he reflected on the growth he had experienced. Weeks earlier, he had cowered behind complacency. Now, he reveled in the solidity of his newfound role, a conduit for change within his workplace. The The whispers of his colleagues had transformed from skepticism to support. Even Susan, who had once challenged him, now sought his input for upcoming initiatives. The final validation came when he was invited to present his findings and proposals at an executive retreat, a platform to share his insights and experiences with a broader audience. Felt surreal. Michael recognized the gravity of this opportunity. It was an acknowledgement not only of his professional competence but a reflection of the profound personal transformation he had undergone. He would no longer be weighed down by the uneasy shadow of his brother's success. Holding the confidence and respect of both colleagues and executives, he realized he had forged his path, governing it with authenticity and integrity. Self-doubt, which had once ruled him, was now replaced with self-assuredness. The culmination of 30 days of deliberate discipline, each morning run, every book read, and each courageous conversation opened doors that he never thought possible. Triumph over his self-limiting beliefs had become his hallmark. Michael smiled, satisfied. He had conquered more than workplace inefficiencies. He had subdued the fear within himself. Today, he was a leader, not merely an employee vying for validation, but a creator of meaningful changes essential for his team's fabric. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Acceptance no longer hinged upon his brother's accolades. Instead, he carved a legacy of his own, the very essence of the man he aspired to be. Now, with every move he made, he was emboldened by the steps that had led him here. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will light the fire of transformation within you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these powerful narratives reach those who need them most. Comment your reactions and theories about this exceptional ending. You are part of this journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who would benefit from this life-changing conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share, as only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.